Good evening, good people. Yep, it's just me, little old me, in front of a camera, actually my iPhone, and I'm talking about the Beatles. And yeah, I guess I should be looking here. If you hear any creaking, that's just my silly old stool that I'm sitting on here in my apartment in Shanghai. And I don't really have any props for this conversation, except I do have in front of me the White Album on iTunes, which I may play a little bit of here and there. We'll see. And I'm recovering from a cold, so you can kind of hear that in my voice. But next week, I'm supposed to give a little talk on the White Album. And I guess I put my foot in it because at some point I posted on Facebook that I thought the White Album is their greatest masterpiece. And of course, that gets a lot of pushback. And what do you mean by that? And why do you think this is such a great album? Wasn't it Sgt. Pepper, or wasn't it Abbey Road, or wasn't it Rubber Soul or Revolver? And I think all of those other four albums also have the are candidates, clear candidates for being the best Beatles album, depending on how you argue it. I want to argue for the White Album because, to me, this is the most diverse and most, I guess, the deepest of the Beatles albums. It's the one that's kind of hardest to get your head around because it's so big. It's 2 discs, not just one. It's 30 songs. So we're used to thinking of the Beatles as being kind of a tight group that made these songs that are incredibly powerful, but also compact and tight arrangements. And you can get through a typical Beatles album in 39 or 40 minutes. But this one takes a lot longer to get through. It's not an easy album to get through. There's a kind of unevenness to the album in terms of, the different songs, the styles, the genres. Although I would say that it does have a certain coherence to it, which I think is more in the way that it was produced and put together, not the individual songs themselves. But it is a sprawling, complex album. And I'm putting it forward that this is their great masterpiece in the same way that I think Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow is his great masterpiece, right? It's definitely not his tightest, most approachable book. He has other books that are a lot more concise. Gravity's Rainbow, as everybody knows, is very sprawling, kind of. Sometimes you go off on these weird tangents, and he always kind of brings you back to the main themes, but you really go on a journey, and I feel that's the same way about the White Album. It's like Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain, right? Full of all sorts of interesting themes, philosophical themes, not an easy read. It really takes a lot of persistence to get through it. So it's that kind of masterpiece is what I'm talking about. So I'm not, people who want to say, oh, Rubber Soul was their greatest album. It was, by virtue of it being tight, by virtue of the songs being catchy and just enjoyable to listen to. Yeah, I get that. If you like kind of the easier forms of art, go for it. Make Rubber Soul your masterpiece. If you like sort of the dreamy psychedelic landscape, make Revolver your masterpiece. If you like the this kind of concept album, very kind of neatly packaged with a lot of imagination, make Sgt. Pepper's your masterpiece. If you like kind of a, return to roots rock and roll plus, the amazing medley, make Abbey Road your masterpiece. Fine. I have no argument. This is totally subjective. But to me, as a fan of Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, as a fan of Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain, this is the Beatles' greatest masterpiece, okay? And if I were to liken it to other albums, this is definitely, and this is well documented, that this album was definitely inspired by Dylan's Blonde on Blonde. So if you think that Blonde on Blonde was his greatest album from that era, why not the White Album, right? Like Blonde on Blonde, it's sprawling. There are so many different ideas thrown in to the album. There are songs that are just go on for a long time, and Long, 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 which was directly inspired, by the way. George Harrison's song Long, Long, Long was inspired by Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. That's right. So a lot of connections there. So Blonde on Blonde was the landmark double album of the 1960s. That was the first. And then, White Album follows pretty quickly on its heels. Blonde on Blonde, 66, White Album, 68. If you think that Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti is their best album, yes, agree. Why not the White Album? Again, so many different ideas thrown into the mix, so many different styles and genres and experimentation. That's what makes Physical Graffiti such a great album, and the White Album. So if you think, what else? I could go on with other examples. Exile on Main Street, the Rolling Stones, right? So the whole concept of a double album is giving the band room and space to experiment, to explore, to maybe even make mistakes, do things that they normally wouldn't do on a tight single disc album. And that's what you get with the White Album. You get a lot of experimentation. They're going off. It's the four Beatles kind of going off in their own directions, but then coming together. There's a lot of centrifugal force going on in the album. There are a lot of songs where one or the other is recording their own song that they composed without the help of the other Beatles. Maybe they're getting a little bit of help in the recording process, but the basic composition is just theirs. Some of the songs are very sparse. Famously, the acoustic guitar songs, Blackbird being the greatest example, and one of the best Beatles songs. I think it's one of the most memorable, one of the most recognized, one of the most covered of the Beatles songs because of its simplicity. So many Beatles songs were so complex with so many harmonies and other features, production features, that you couldn't really cover those songs and do justice to them. But a song like Blackbird, just a guy on guitar, that's all it takes. If you're a guitar player, it's a wonderful challenge to learn how to play Blackbird. Julia, John Lennon's solo acoustic contribution, although it does have a little bit of help from others, but it's basically, or does it? It's basically John Lennon's song about his mother, Julia. And one of his most beautiful songs, one of his most poetic songs, just as Blackbird is one of Paul's most beautiful, memorable, and poetic songs. So you've got Blackbird and Julia. You've got these two jewels embedded in the White Album. But you have a lot of rock and roll songs, starting with Back in the USSR, which apparently Mike Love of the Beach Boys helped them to compose this song. You know, they were all in Rishikesh in India in 1968. So in terms of influences, it goes back to Rishikesh. It goes back to that moment when they left England as a group, not to go off to other countries to perform as they had in the past, but to go off on this mystical retreat with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who then becomes kind of a controversial figure in their story, because he is rumored to have maybe made passes at some of the ladies in his retreat in India. Whether that's true or not, I can't say for sure, but that was definitely the rumor, and that led them to leave. And also, I think Rishikesh, not only was it sort of the wellspring, the source of so many of these songs, it's where they came up with the ideas, came up with the songs, the stories. There are several of these songs that are directly tied to that experience. One is Dear Prudence, also one of the best songs on the album, in my opinion. And another one of John's greatest songs. In its simplicity, it's a very simple song in terms of its lyrics, almost like a children's song. Won't you come out and play, etc. And it's backed by this beautiful kind of finger-style guitar run down the fretboard, and then you have kind of the descending chromatic, kind of like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, backing up the main part of the song, and the verses with all these bridges in between that lift up the song and make it more and more compelling, and the song gets bigger and bigger, and more backing instruments and drums until it almost ends like a symphony. It's kind of like a sunburst at the very end. It's just one of their most beautiful songs. And that was about the Prudence Farrow, the sister of Mia Farrow, who was there along with her sister Mia at the retreat, and she was spending too much time meditating. Maybe they thought she should come out and have some fun with the boys. So John wrote that song to kind of coax her out, come out to play. It's beautiful, and so are you. It's also it could be kind of a love song, could be a romantic song, or kind of an enticing song, a man enticing a woman. And the other song that famously connects to the Rishikesh experience is Sexy Sadie, which was originally a John kind of satirizing, criticizing their guru, and then told that he shouldn't use the name, so he just made up Sexy Sadie. So at least two songs that are directly connected to stories of Rishikesh, but also the whole fingerstyle guitar that they mastered during this period was influenced by another famous visitor to Rishikesh at that time, which was Donovan. So lots of influences going into this album from that experience. So many ideas coming into this album, so many different styles of music. Paul, you could say that he's drawing on, but also maybe satirizing some typical genres through, Rocky Raccoon, a cowboy song, which he does so well. It's such a memorable story. It's such a visual. It's almost like a cinematic story of a Western. And every time I go to a hotel and, open the drawer and see Gideon's Bible, I think of this song. So I'm sure that's true of a lot of people. You have songs by George, which are at least one that's among his best songs. So he's really emerging as a songwriter. So George is coming out of the shadow of John and Paul and emerging as a songwriter of great talent, particularly with the song While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which involves a solo by Eric Clapton, his friends. You have even Ringo coming up with songs, Don't Pass Me By. So contributions from all of the band members, but mostly it's John and Paul. And here, in the past, they were, usually writing as a pair. And of course, many of their best songs were collaborative efforts, John and Paul sitting somewhere with guitars and just singing to each other and looking each other in the eyes, as it says in the book, John and Paul, wonderful book that I reviewed on my channel a few months ago. But in this case, you can see that John and Paul are coming apart and they're emerging as solo artists. You're really seeing the first kind of stirrings of their future, of the band breaking up, and they're all going off in their own directions as solo artists, John, Paul, George, and then Ringo doing his own thing. So again, there's tremendous centrifugal force, a push and a pull coming together and then pushing apart, like almost as if they're magnets, and they attract each other and then they repel each other, and they're creating this weird energy of, this kind of energy of pushing and pulling, coming together, coming apart, almost like the societies that they were living in at the time. I mean, this was an incredibly volatile era, the late 1960s, 1968 in particular. You had revolutionary movements, you had protest movements, you had assassinations, particularly in the USA. There was the Cultural Revolution in China, carrying pictures of Chairman Mao. So this whole song, there's a whole revolutionary pulse, I think, to this album. And that's reflected especially in John's song Revolution. If you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, it's interesting, there's a kind of a connection. Revolution 1, there's a connection with back in the USSR. It's almost as if, they had traveled around the world while they were touring, right, during the height of their popularity as a live band. But there's conspicuously two places that they didn't go to. One was the USSR and the other was communist China. And it's almost as if they're kind of poking fun at both countries and also fantasizing that they're going to go there. They're going to go to the USSR and meet all these beautiful women from different regions of the USSR and so forth. They didn't write a song about China, but they did reference Chairman Mao, and it's one of the very few pop rock songs, I think, that references Chairman Mao. There's probably others out there, but I'm sure my friend DJ Bo could come up with a list of songs referencing Chairman Mao. Anyway, again, it's this album is not for everybody. A lot of people, there's that old like chestnut, right, that you always see on Facebook posts and in conversations. Oh, what if they took the White Album and made it into a single disc? with all the best songs. Wouldn't that have been so much better? And apparently George Martin was also favored the idea of taking the best of the best, which he would. I mean, George Martin was being a perfectionist, and he really wanted to showcase the best work that they were capable of. I'm sure that he felt that a lot of these songs, could have been thrown into the dustbin. But thank God that they weren't. Thank God that the Beatles held to their guns, so to speak. And thank God that John held to his position and didn't let them take away one of the most brilliant compositions in the album, which is Revolution 9. And again, this is one of the most controversial. A lot of people are like, oh, I can't stand this. What is this nonsense? I think fortunately, when I first listened to this album, I was like 8 years old. I mean, I remember my grandfather bought it for me, and I took it home and I just listened and listened and listened, and it was on heavy rotation for months and months of so many memories from childhood of those songs and different associations. So I have a personal connection to the album, which others may not. But whenever Revolution 9 came on, my ears pricked up. The ears of an 8-year-old. It was like, ooh, what's this? This is cool. This is weird. What are they chanting here? And why is she saying you become naked? And, there's so many different pieces that go in. It's like a little kaleidoscope, a little jigsaw puzzle with the pieces kind of all thrown together. And it just made me curious. It felt at the same time very British. Number 9, number 9, number 9. It's kind of BBC, and that was always something that that I liked about the Beatles is how British they sounded, and I was a big Anglophile, and I guess still am today. I mean, I loved the BBC shows and Monty Python and all that stuff, and the English accent and the Liverpudlian accent. And so this was, number 9, number 9, number 9. And then all these weird, kind of orchestral pieces moving in and out, and people groaning and babies. And it was kind of like just a slice of life. It was amazing. And to this day, I'm blown away by that track. So I'm so glad that it stayed on the album, that John insisted against the others that they keep this piece, this composition, or whatever you're going to call it, a collage on the album. Why not, And there's really nothing on the album that turns me off. There's nothing that I would get up and move the needle to skip, oh, I don't want to hear this again. Every song has its personality. Every song has its little story, its imagery, its craft. Obviously some are better than others. Some are, you could make a single disc, no doubt about it. There might be a few, differences of opinion, but I think the majority of people who love the Beatles could easily come up with a set of 14 or 15 songs that would be, the best on this double album. That's true of any double album. So going through, I think you'd have to keep Back in the USSR because it's so iconic. Dear Prudence for sure. Glass Onion, maybe you could leave out, although it's got all those references to the other Beatles songs, which are cool, and The Walrus was Paul, and all this weird stuff. Obla Di Obla Da, people have different opinions of. Some think it's kind of corny, but I'll tell you, it is a fun party song. It's a song, no matter what you feel about it, you hear Obla Di Obla Da, you're going to feel happy. And it's got a story to it, an interesting story with a little twist at the end. Wild Honey Pie is one that people are like, what's that doing on this album? But I like the the kind of weird sort of country pie kind of weird sound to it. And Bungalow Bill is another one that people are like, I don't know. It's kind of hokey again. Bungalow Bill. I mean, is it a parody of a Western? But again, I feel like this is a kind of a memorable character. He's sort of a superhero, but maybe they're poking fun at the American hero or the American cowboy. But it also seems to be connected to India. Went out tiger hunting. Where do you go tiger hunting except in India? With his elephant and gun. That's definitely a reference to India, if I've ever heard one. So there's some weird reminiscence or some memory going on with India. Anyway, it's an interesting song. To me, I like it. I don't know if it would be on the first cut, though. Well, My Guitar Gently Weeps, definitely one of the best songs on the album. Happiness is a Warm Gun. Again, I think this is one of their better songs on this album. It's got the weird kind of surreal Lennon lyrics. It's got different parts to the song. It's a parody. It's kind of, parodying, could it be America, or the idea that a gun is going to keep you safe. Martha, My Dear. That's an endearing song that Paul apparently wrote about his sheepdog. Whether or not it would make the first cut is debatable. I'm So Tired is probably a second cut song, but it's I like it. I like the kind of the bridge part of the song, and it's got some memorable lyrics. He was such a stupid git. I think that's the first time that I ever heard the word git. So you learn a lot of like British slang. Piggies. Some people don't like this song. It's obviously a no holds barred parody of the rich, the upper classes who are the piggies, kind of an Animal Farm thing. You've got Rocky Raccoon, Don't Pass Me By. I think those are all kind of second tier songs. Why Don't We Do It on the Road? Again, a second tier, but it's, his, Paul being Paul, bringing out that bluesy voice. He's got a great voice, a great kind of gravelly voice on this song. I Will, beautiful song. I think that's a first tier song on the album. It's a love song. It's got a beautiful melody. And then Julia, absolutely, one of the best songs on the album. A love song to his mother, some of John's best poetry. This is just such a haunting song. And again, it's just so simple. You can pull out your acoustic guitar and just play this song. Birthday on disc 2. Definite thumbs up to Birthday. A nice alternative to the Happy Birthday song. Your Blues, one of the better blues treatments that the Beatles did. Really a gripping, just heart-wrenching song by John. Definitely first tier. Mother Nature's Son, another of Paul's great acoustic fingerstyle songs. I'd say it's up there, maybe just under Blackbird. Similar in ways to Blackbird. It's got a kind of a simple story, simple message, but just beautiful guitar work. Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey. That's, definitely a second tier song, but a fun one. Come on, come on, come on, come on. It's got that kind of 60s vibe, that kind of far out, man, kind of 60s vibe, like hippie vibe to it. Sexy Sadie, that's the one that's sort of the veiled critique of their guru in India and their experience with him. Kind of a sad story, but it's what happened. Helter Skelter, Paul's notorious dive into heavy metal. It's loud, it's noisy, it's raucous. He's screaming at the top of his lungs. It's got heavy metal guitar going on. Very simple message. Go back down the slide, go back to the top. It's kind of a song that children can appreciate. Whether that's a first tier song, I can't say for sure, but Long, 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 George's maybe tribute to his friend Bob Dylan, whom he spent some time with in 1968 in Woodstock, and they composed some songs together. And that's a great episode in the story of George and in the story of Bob Dylan's very complex and intimate relationship with the Beatles. I mean, they obviously had a great mutual influence on each other. And the 60s wouldn't be the 60s if it weren't for that relationship between Dylan and the Beatles. That just created so much of music to come. Honey Pie, which is, I already spoke about Revolution 1. Honey Pie is, again, kind of a throwback to the 1930s sort of music hall, the kind of music that maybe Paul's father would have been listening to. It's got a beautiful kind of piano piece and some, what is that, clarinet, or I can't remember, but it's got that sort of jazz age feel to it. I've always loved that song because I'm a jazz age guy. Some people, again, think it's kind of hokey. That would definitely make my first cut. Savoy Truffle, another George song that's a bit, again, it feels a bit 60s, a bit dated. Definitely not their top tier material, but it's got some kooky lyrics to it. Cry Baby Cry, another John Lennon song that seems to be based on a kind of Mother Goose rhyme. King was in the kitchen, the Queen was at the piano, etc., etc. It's got a very kind of Mother Goosey feel to it. Not their best work, but interesting. Revolution 9, which I think, again, is one of their great experimental pieces. I'm glad that they kept that one on. It's one that just always makes you think. It kind of, it kind of discombobulates your brain when you listen to it. Good Night, the final song, another Lennon, kind of a Lennon lullaby that Ringo gets to sing at the very end. That can kind of put you to sleep, lull you to sleep after the weirdness of Revolution 9. So yeah, that's the album in a nutshell. Then you could go into all the details of, little bits and pieces of, how they knit it together, how they stitched all this together is another story. But I'm just going to end there because there's so much to talk about and so much to discuss. Every song merits a discussion. So that's it for my take on the White Album for now. Cheers and good night from Shanghai. Cue. And now we say good night, and may all have sweet dreams and a pleasant tomorrow. Number 9, number 9.